That Sunday afternoon, I drove home after a typical summer day. I had slept in, gone to church, and then golfed with friends, a routine that had defined my Sundays for the past year since our second child left home. Our eldest, Laura, now 20, had moved away to nursing school 2 years ago, followed last year by our youngest, Josh, who went off to college. Anticipating a relaxing evening with my wife of 21 years, Jenny, I pulled into the garage with a renewed sense of gratitude for her presence in my life. Her car was already parked, indicating she had spent the day visiting her longtime friends, Joan and Petra. I looked forward to grilling steaks and sharing a cozy moment, whether on the couch or elsewhere. Entering the house, I was struck by the sight of Jenny at the kitchen table, a glass and half-empty bottle of wine in front of her. It was an unusual sight, enough to trigger a subtle alarm in my mind. I kissed her on the cheek, sensing nervous determination in her eyes. "Sit down, Dave. We need to talk," she said. The alarms in my mind escalated. I complied, suppressing my emotions as years of managing a large underground mine had taught me. I could compartmentalize my feelings, focusing solely on the logical task at hand, a skill honed over a 25-year career where emotions often took a backseat to action. I sat calmly, masking my emotions behind a neutral expression. "Dave, you know I love you with all my heart, right?" Jenny began. "Of course, honey. You've told me that nearly every week for the past 2 decades. And you love me with all your heart too, don't you, Dave?" "Absolutely, sweetheart. I've loved you every day since we met 23 years ago. I'd take a bullet for you without a second thought. I loved you when you agreed to marry me, through every challenge we've faced together." Jenny visibly hesitated but pressed on with her prepared speech. "Dave, I have something to say, and I'd appreciate it if you could let me finish before responding. Can you do that for me?" The conversation hung in the air, tension mounting as I waited for Jenny to continue, my mind racing with possibilities of what could follow her unusual preamble. I nodded silently and retrieved my ever-present notebook and pen. My emotions were still in retreat, and I was careful not to let my voice betray any nervousness that had suddenly crept in. The phrase "we need to talk" may have sparked good conversations somewhere in the past, but it certainly didn't seem likely in this century. "You know both Joan and Petra are married, right?" "Well, what you probably don't know is that they both have lovers," Jenny said, searching my eyes for a reaction. I made sure my expression revealed nothing. I was fairly certain where this conversation was headed, but I remained poker-faced. "Both Bill and John know about their wives' lovers and are apparently okay with it. Turns out, Bill gets turned on watching Joan with other men, and she even brings her lovers to their house for him to watch." Throughout her explanation, Jenny had been looking down at the table. At the mention of Bill's voyeuristic tendencies, she finally looked me in the eye, perhaps searching for any similarity in my reaction. I maintained an empty, indifferent expression, and she quickly averted her gaze back to the table. I jotted down a note in my notebook. "After Joan's lover leaves, she claims she and Bill have the best sex of their marriage," I wrote, feeling a pang of regret for potentially losing Bill as a friend. I valued my friendships deeply. Jenny glanced at me again, clearly unsettled by my continued impassivity. She proceeded with her prepared remarks. "John didn't take Petra's confession about her lover as well as Bill did. He threw a fit but ultimately stayed with her. He won't allow Petra's lover in their house, so they meet at a motel. Petra's lover is apparently married too, and she usually returns home before midnight. John refuses to be intimate with her on those nights, but otherwise, they're reportedly having more and better sex than they have in years. Petra claims she's learned things from her lover that she brings back to John, and she feels closer to him now than ever before." I sighed inwardly, realizing John might also become distant as a friend. "Both Petra and Joan's lovers are younger than they are," Jenny continued. "They say it makes them feel incredibly sexy and desired. Joan has had multiple young lovers. She enjoys going to bars and picking them up. She gets a thrill from choosing among the men who hit on her. Most aren't comfortable going to her place for obvious reasons, so she often spends the night at their homes for private encounters. If they want a repeat, she insists on hosting them at her place next time. Given her allure, they usually agree to her terms. At this point, I was almost certain where all of this was heading. I excused myself under the guise of fetching a beer from the fridge and visiting the bathroom. In those moments, I composed myself, pushing my emotions into the recesses of my mind and engaging my logical faculties. I devised a few plans, all revolving around the need for evidence. I had to act quickly. I spent a couple of minutes familiarizing myself with the voice recorder on my phone, activated it, and discreetly slipped it into my shirt pocket before returning to the kitchen. Resuming my seat, I broke my silence for the first time. "Why are you telling me all this, Jennifer?" She still didn't meet my gaze as she continued with her explanation. "Well, Dave, honey, I'm 47 now and I've been a housewife for 21 years. I'm starting to notice my looks fading and more wrinkles appearing. I need to prove I'm still attractive to men. I have to prove I've still got it." There was a significant pause, a moment where our entire marriage seemed to hang in the balance. "I've told you how Bill and John handled it," she continued tentatively, finally looking at me with concern. "How will you react? Would you want to watch like Bill, or would you prefer me to seek satisfaction elsewhere?" Damn it, I wasn't as composed as I had hoped. My emotions surged, overwhelming my logical resolve. Rage took the lead by a landslide, but I maintained my silence as I wrestled them back under control. The ensuing quiet was palpably uncomfortable for Jenny. She searched my face, seeking any indication of my thoughts. What she found, I couldn't say. "I'm going to have a lover, Dave," she declared, her voice tinged with nerves. "I love you dearly, and I'd never jeopardize our future. But I need this. I want to grow old with you, and I need to feel desirable before I'm too old and wrinkled. Our sex life is wonderful, and I hope it will only get better after this. I don't know how long this phase will last, but I need your support. I trust your love for me. I'd never cheat on you, and that's why I'm having this conversation. You've always said my happiness is paramount to you, now you have the chance to prove it. I believe in us, Dave." Having poured out her heart, she anxiously awaited my response. Her uncertainty betrayed her earlier faith in my forgiveness. I muttered that I needed time to think, retreated to my study, and locked the door behind me. Alone, I allowed my emotions to surface briefly. Rage consumed me again, and I vented by pummeling a couch cushion until my wrist ached. Eventually, sorrow took over, and I sank into my chair, grappling with the weight of the moment. It took considerable effort to rein in my emotions and let logic take the reins again. I mulled over the situation meticulously. Jenny's behavior was so out of character that I could only surmise she was experiencing some kind of breakdown or had been influenced by something beyond her control. Over an hour passed, and though I remained bewildered, I reached a few conclusions. Foremost among them was my unwavering belief that if Jenny were to cross the line and sleep with another man, our marriage would be irreparably damaged. At my age, starting anew wasn't an option. There was only one course of action that made sense: she had to abandon this reckless idea. Once I resolved this, my plan crystallized, and I jotted down notes to ensure I didn't overlook anything. I spent another 10 minutes ensuring the voice recorder files were securely backed up on my computer before returning to the kitchen. Jenny had been on the phone but ended the call abruptly, now sitting back at the table with an empty wine bottle before her. Taking a seat across from her, I began cautiously. "Jennifer, could I clarify a few things and then ask you some questions?" She nodded in response. "Let me see if I understand correctly," I started calmly. "After 21 years of marriage, you believe you need to prove your sexual attractiveness by pursuing other relationships outside of our marriage. And you're informing me of this decision, not seeking my approval, but anticipating that I will prioritize your happiness above all else. Is that accurate?" She hesitated, contemplating her response. "Not quite, Dave," she finally replied. "I need this. While your approval would mean a lot to me, I am prepared to go ahead regardless. I believe that because this is purely physical and doesn't involve our emotional bond, you will understand and support my need for this." "Well, Jennifer, I'm at a loss for words," I said, emphasizing her full name, which I rarely used in our marriage. "But I want to be clear, I am not like Bill. I will never derive pleasure from the idea or sight of you with another man. In fact, I'm not sure I can handle it like John claims he does. These past few hours have profoundly wounded our marriage. Can I ask you, have I ever given you reason to hurt me like this? Have I not treated you as an equal partner, with respect, love, support, and understanding? Does my work not provide for us financially and earn us the respect we deserve? Have I not fulfilled your needs in every way, including our intimate life? Can you honestly tell me how I could be a better husband? She interjected at this point. Don't be ridiculous, Dave. You've always given me everything I could ever want. I've already told you that our sex life is fantastic, and it is. This has nothing to do with you or our relationship. Dave, I love you deeply, and as a husband, I would rate you a perfect 10. Well then, Jennifer, I have to admit I'm still completely baffled. Isn't my desire for you obvious? Despite not having the same body as a 20-year-old, and really, what mother of two does, haven't I proven your attractiveness to me 1,000 times over? Don't I still eagerly watch you undress and show my admiration for your body? Don't I make love to you every chance I get? Doesn't that show you how irresistible I find you? Isn't that enough for you? I fell silent, allowing her ample time to respond. She continued staring at the table. I pressed on. One question confounds me above all. If I am the perfect husband you claim, why would you risk everything by needing this? If you're as happy as you say I make you, why would you jeopardize it all for meaningless affairs? Cutting me off, she replied, I don't see it as a risk, Dave. I believe you'll come to understand why I must do this and get past any initial objections you may have. Then we can move forward as we always have. Now it was my turn to interrupt. Listen, Jennifer, I've always respected you as an equal partner, and I would never dream of forbidding you from making this foolish, self-destructive choice. It's your decision. But I'm begging you to consider the potential consequences. You're gambling with the foundation of our marriage, and I'm not as confident as you are that we can survive infidelity. I paused, giving her another chance to respond. Again, she remained silent, her eyes fixed on the table. I'm still utterly confused, and I think we both need time to contemplate our next steps, I continued. Personally, I believe there may be underlying issues at play here, and I strongly suggest you seek counseling for yourself or both of us before proceeding any further. I'm willing to support either option and help you find a counselor. Don't be silly, Dave. We don't need counseling, and I know I'm not mentally unwell, she countered. Well, Jennifer, let's be honest. Counseling seems to be our best shot at saving our marriage right now, I asserted. Her response was a look I couldn't quite decipher. I also think it's wise for you to reconsider your friendship with Petra and Joan. It's clear they're influencing you negatively, and while it's your decision, continuing that friendship has already strained my trust in your commitment to our marriage. If you keep them in your life, I fear it may cost us our marriage. Now for the critical questions. Tell me, Jennifer, I began, my voice steady but loaded with urgency, when do you plan on starting these affairs? Do you already have someone lined up? She met my gaze, weighing her response carefully. Well, Joan has a friend she wants me to meet this Friday. If I like him, we'll see where it goes. If not, there's a guy at work who's been flirting with me. I might explore that. Before my anger could erupt once more, I stood abruptly. Well, Jennifer, it seems you've made your decision for both of us. I'm going to pack and leave for a few days. You don't have to leave. Please don't, she pleaded. Oh, yes, I do, Jennifer. I sat back down heavily. Jennifer, do you think of me as a quiet, patient man? Yes, Dave, you are, she replied softly. Have you ever heard the saying, beware the fury of a patient man? She nodded cautiously. Well, Jennifer, I've never brought this up because it's never been necessary. Twice in my life, I've been consumed by rage to the point where I nearly lost control. Both times, I would have done something irreparable if others hadn't intervened. Wife dear, I'm dangerously close to that edge once again. She could see the seriousness in my eyes now. Her face paled slightly, and she instinctively pulled back. Without another word, I went to our bedroom to pack enough for a week away. Over my shoulder, I gave her an ultimatum. I'll give you 10 minutes to think about this before I leave. Returning within the allocated time with my suitcases, I found Jennifer still sitting at the table. I set down my bags and faced her expectantly. "Well, Jennifer?" I prompted. Tears welled up in her eyes as she responded, her voice tinged with defiance. "Petra warned me you might react like this. She said John moved out for 2 weeks when she first told him, but he eventually came back when he realized she was serious. If it helps, Dave, think about what a divorce would mean for you. Think about the kids, the house, the bank accounts, alimony. Think about the loneliness, the shame, the heartache. Dave, I have to do this. I am going to do this." I knew I had to leave before my mounting rage clouded my judgment and caused irreparable damage. Standing up once more, I turned to go. "Well, I guess you have until next Friday to change your mind," I remarked tersely as I walked around the table and stood beside her. With gentle determination, I reached for her left hand and removed her wedding and engagement rings. Her eyes widened with realization as tears streamed down her cheeks, silently watching me place them in my pocket. "Just so you understand the gravity of what you're risking," I said softly, meeting her gaze for one last moment. Then, without looking back, I grabbed my bags and walked out of the front door. Once in my car, I was shocked to see that it was already past 11 p.m. In just 5 hours, our marital bliss had spiraled into a complete disaster. I quickly checked into one of the few hotels in town that still had its reception open. The night was nearly sleepless, and the next morning, I made a pivotal decision. I called my boss and requested a week off, citing the seriousness of the situation. He understood the gravity, given my impeccable attendance record over 25 years, with only 6 days off due to sickness, 5 of which were for appendicitis. No details were exchanged, and none were offered. My restless night had at least provided me with a clear plan for the day ahead. My first stop was an electronics store, where I purchased 2 voice-activated electronic recorders and 2 telephone taps. After ensuring they had fresh batteries and giving some instructions, I swung by the house while Jennifer was at work. I strategically placed a phone tap in both the kitchen and the bedroom, allowing me to download their contents onto my laptop whenever necessary. Similarly, I set up recorders in the kitchen and living room to capture any conversations. Next, I visited our family solicitor's office. Though I didn't intend to use him for a divorce, I sought general advice. As he wasn't a divorce specialist, he consulted one of his partners who was more knowledgeable in this area. I candidly explained the situation and sought guidance on the possible outcomes. After a few probing questions, he outlined the best and worst-case scenarios. Contrary to Jennifer's assumptions, our house, being community property, wouldn't automatically be hers upon divorce since our minor children were no longer living at home. He explained that we could either buy each other out or sell the house and split the proceeds. Given Jennifer's income, he doubted I'd have to pay alimony, especially if I could prove infidelity. The worst-case scenario involved a 50% split of our shared assets, while the best-case scenario leaned towards 70%. When I played him the recordings from the previous night, he suggested the higher end due to what he perceived as elements close to blackmail on her part. Except for necessary calls, I kept my cell phone off throughout the day. Each time I switched it on, the number of missed calls and messages from Jennifer had escalated, yet I chose not to read or respond to any. My third task was to coordinate a meeting with the 3 other parties involved, which required 6 phone calls to arrange, including one via Skype. I asked them not to contact Jennifer before our meeting and remained tight-lipped when they pressed for details. Fourthly, I called my doctor's receptionist and scheduled a call for 12:30 p.m. After explaining my situation, he advised me to visit him later that day. Our conversation extended for over an hour. Finally, my toughest task of the day was calling John, Petra's husband. I arranged to meet him at a bar after his work hours, and he agreed to the meeting. As he approached me, I noticed the confusion etched on John's face. To cut to the chase, I explained that I needed to discuss a very personal matter and assured him he could leave whenever he felt uncomfortable. I then briefed him on Jennifer's ultimatum from the previous night, under the impression he was in a similar situation. To his credit, he didn't walk away but instead took on the demeanor of a defeated man. It took him 2 neat whiskeys to gather himself enough to speak. He confessed that he absolutely despised Petra's proposal. The intensity of his statement left no room for doubt. He clarified that he had returned home primarily for the sake of their teenage children and also because he couldn't afford to lose the house, pay substantial child support, alimony, and surrender most of their savings. When I asked if he had sought legal advice, he admitted he had relied on Petra's assurances. I shared the insights from my lawyer, highlighting the differences in their situations given John's children were still minors. I inquired about Petra's claim regarding their improved sex life since her involvement with another man. John nearly choked on his drink. After recovering, he revealed that in the 7 months since their relationship had deteriorated, they had possibly been intimate 3 or 4 times, all while he was intoxicated. In appreciation, I promptly arranged for my solicitor to assist John, which he eagerly accepted. Reluctantly, I asked for one more favor, which he agreed to, promising to call when the time was right. My respect for John grew immensely. His sacrifices for his children were poignant and understandable. I briefly pondered the stark contrast between Petra's depiction of their new sexual dynamic and John's reality. Was Petra deluding herself or intentionally misrepresenting the truth to Jennifer? After an emotionally exhausting day, I returned to the motel, collapsed onto the bed, and sifted through Jennifer's texts before listening to her voicemails. I responded with a succinct message: "Please contact me only when you've decided to stop this foolishness." There was no reply that night. Another night of restless sleep followed, and the next morning I parked near our house and waited for Jennifer to leave for work. Once she was gone, I let myself in and swiftly retrieved the recordings from all 4 devices. Back at the motel, I began reviewing the phone taps. The bedroom tap was silent, but the kitchen phone told a different story. The first call was made shortly after Jennifer returned home from work on Monday. As expected, it was to Petra. Jennifer recounted our confrontation and expressed uncertainty about my intentions, noting my typically impassive demeanor. My seriousness had evidently made an impact, as Jennifer was considering calling off her plans. My disdain for Petra grew as I heard her belittle Jennifer, labeling her as weak and eventually convincing her to stay the course. The second call was to Joan, who urged Jennifer to persevere for the sake of experiencing the best sex of her life. Both conversations centered heavily on sex, with no mention of feeling young or desirable again, which troubled me deeply when considered together. On the kitchen voice recorder, the only notable sound was Jennifer sobbing after the final call. Though it pained me to hear her like that, I suppressed my sympathy. At 10:45 a.m. on Tuesday, Father Wayne, our parish priest, arrived first, followed shortly by Lorraine, Jennifer's mother. I offered them refreshments while we awaited 11 a.m. without divulging why they were summoned. At 10:59 a.m., I dialed into Skype on my laptop and turned the screen so everyone could see Laura, my daughter, who joined us from her school dormitory. After exchanging pleasantries, Laura asked what the gathering was about. In response, I played the voice recorder file from my laptop, starting from the second conversation where I confronted Jennifer about her intentions from that fateful evening. The playback ceased shortly after I turned off the recorder to pack, just after Jennifer confirmed she had potential suitors lined up. As the recording laid bare Jennifer's plans, I watched everyone's expressions contort in disbelief. Silence reigned until the recording concluded, and then chaos erupted. I listened, recognizing the same turmoil I had felt since Sunday. Once everyone had their say, I explained that I had done everything in my power except outright forbidding Jennifer from proceeding. I clarified why I refrained from taking that step. Jennifer needed to make this decision voluntarily, not out of coercion. After my explanation, it was clear to all present that the end of my marriage was imminent. I outlined my next steps, and everyone agreed that convincing Jennifer to halt on her own accord was the best approach. Despite never being particularly close, I was surprised by the depth of emotion in Lorraine's eyes. Her expression revealed not just anger but also a sense of maternal responsibility for this situation. It reminded me of the saying, "Your son is your son till he takes a wife. Your daughter is your daughter for the rest of your life." We reviewed the plan once more and outlined a rough timeline. Tomorrow would be the day to put it into action. Before they departed, I reiterated my request that they refrain from threatening Jennifer in any way. Her decision had to come from within, driven by a sense of what was right, not fear of consequences. That night, I slept better than I had all week. I had a plan and felt a renewed sense of confidence in its potential. There were no calls or messages from Jennifer. Knowing Wednesday was Jennifer's day off and she typically slept in until at least 9 a.m., I called Laura at 8:30 a.m. and gave her the green light, reminding her of the guidelines. Her continued anger was evident from the tone of her voice. Chapter 2, Judgment Day, 8:34 a.m. to 9:05 a.m. The events recounted below are pieced together from my recollections of conversations that day, deductions, and recordings retrieved from the recorders I installed after leaving home. It wasn't until 2 days after Jennifer was hospitalized that I finally listened to them. I'm grateful for my habit of compulsive note-taking under stress. Wednesday, 8:34 a.m., Jennifer answered a ringing telephone. "Hello, Jenny speaking." "Mom, it's me." "Oh, hello Laura, it's unusual for you to call midweek. Is everything all right, sweetie?" "No, everything is not all right, Mom. What's this nonsense about you wanting to sleep around on Dad?" There was an audible gasp from Jennifer's end, followed by many, many seconds of silence. "Mom, are you there? Did you hear me?" More silence then. Who told you that?" "Oh my God, did you speak to your dad? What did he say?" I never said that. We were just talking about a bit of variety in our sex life and, well, I may have mentioned the possibility of having an open marriage, you know, if we both agreed with." "Bullshit, Mom. The way I heard the story was that you made a stupid, unilateral decision to go out this weekend and fuck some man slut whether Dad liked it or not. Poor old Dad is devastated. I mean, what has the poor prick done to deserve that? Did you catch him screwing around on you or something?" I could hear my daughter getting angrier and angrier. I could almost see the spittle flying over her end of the phone. Jenny tried to regain the initiative. "No chance. Every successful battle strategist in history has known that whoever has the high ground wins." Laura had the moral high ground whilst Jennifer subconsciously knew she was in the moral quagmire at the bottom of the hill. She desperately needed time to think. "Laura, sweetie, can I call you back in a little while?" "No, you fucking can't, Mom. We're going to talk about this right now. I'm scared, Mom. When I have kids, I want them to see both of you. I want Dad to bounce my little boy on his knee like he did with me, and I want you to hold my little girl and sing to her like you did to me. What you're considering will ruin all of that. Mom, how could you?" What followed was a full 5 minutes of what I can only describe as a tirade, as my daughter unleashed her feelings on her mother. I could hear gasps and sobs from Jennifer's end of the phone. I could only imagine Jennifer's emotional turmoil as she listened to her daughter's passionate and hurtful words. With Laura and I both expressing our disapproval, surely Jennifer would reconsider her plan. But in a crisis, quick thinking isn't one of her strong points. When Laura paused to catch her breath, Jenny tried to rally. "But sweetie, it wasn't like that, I never." "Come on, Mom, don't add lying to your list of mistakes. Dad made it clear that's exactly what you planned. He told me he'd already told you he didn't want this, but you refused to listen." Jennifer interrupted with sudden confidence. "Laura, I don't know exactly what your dad said to you, but he never explicitly told me I couldn't proceed with this." Laura interrupted again, her tone sharp. "Of course he didn't, Mom. He knows he can't dictate what you do as an equal partner in your marriage. He can only give you enough freedom to make your own choices." Jennifer was taken aback. "What do you mean by that, Laura?" There was a brief pause before Laura continued. "Mom, I see 3 possible outcomes here. First, you could try talking to Dad again and see if he'll agree to this ridiculous idea. But I'm telling you now, he won't. Second, you could go ahead with your plan and face the consequences. Before you decide that, think about what you're risking, not just Dad's love, but mine and Josh's too. Everyone knows where that path leads. The third option is to drop this stupid idea, tell Dad it was a mistake, and end all of this nonsense. Then you better start apologizing and hope Dad will forgive you." But he hasn't left. "Mom, stop lying to yourself. He's already left emotionally. He's waiting to see if you'll choose option 2 or 3. If you choose option 3, maybe you can salvage something. But if you go with option 2, you're just tightening the noose around your own neck. Surely, Mom, you can see that. I was struck by Laura's composure and wisdom. I couldn't have been prouder of her in that moment, though saddened by how Jennifer's actions had affected our daughter. Jennifer was clearly overwhelmed. She hadn't anticipated Laura and Josh having opinions or discovering her plans. She needed time to think, but Laura's directness left her little room to maneuver. Then, in a desperate move, Jennifer tried to lie, unaware that Laura already knew the truth. "Sweetie, I really don't know what your dad has told you, but it wasn't like that at all." That was as far as Jennifer got. Laura erupted in anger, her words sharp and cutting. I was embarrassed by the language she used, and after several minutes, she abruptly ended the call. I could only imagine Jennifer's shock. Who hangs up on their own mother? The kitchen recorder captured Jennifer's sobs as she tried to call Laura back unsuccessfully. Laura followed the plan and called Lorraine next. She called me afterward, too angry to talk. I reminded her that Jennifer had always been an exceptional mother who deserved her respect and love. Chapter 3, Judgment Day, 9:07 a.m. to 9:31 a.m. I had carefully planned the timing of the second and subsequent phone calls. Laura called Lorraine before me to prevent Jennifer from having time to process our disapproval. She might rationalize our concerns individually, but a unanimous disapproval, without time to reflect, would be more impactful. I was grappling with why Jennifer believed we could survive her plan. Did she not know me at all? I believed temporary insanity was at play here. Unfortunately, the tight time frame before Friday left no room to convince her of that or to push for treatment. People with mental illness are often the last to acknowledge they need help. Brap, brap. Hello, Jenny speaking. Hello, Jenny, it's Mom. Oh, hi, Mom. I'm a little busy right now. Can I ring you back? No, we need to talk right now. What's the matter? You sound like you're crying? Yes, I am. Laura just called and said some very hurtful things. Yes, and I know what you probably talked about. Dave spoke to me as well. No, Dot. Yes, Jenny. Jenny, how could you? She let that hang in the air, waiting for Jennifer to regain her composure. Look, Mom, I really don't think it has anything to do with you. It's between me and Dave. It has everything to do with me. Don't you see that whatever a daughter does, no matter how old she is, reflects on the mother? I've always respected Dave as a good provider for you and a great father to the kids. Your dad loved him. I'm glad he's not around anymore to see this, God rest his soul. He must be turning in his grave to see how foolish his daughter is behaving. Just what has Dave done to deserve what you intend to do to him? No, what you have done to him. Despite Lorraine's sharp words, I couldn't help but admire her calm demeanor. Her composed deliveries seemed more effective than Laura's earlier angry outburst. Jenny's sobbing grew louder in the background. Lorraine, patient as ever, let Jennifer set the pace. Finally, Jennifer calmed down enough to speak coherently. Look, Mom, I don't know what Dave has told you, but I haven't done anything to him. I simply told him that I was a little bored with our sex life and asked him if he would consider letting me experiment a little with another man. I paused the recording to reflect. In all my years with Jennifer, I had never caught her in a direct lie. She was the most honest person I knew. Yet, what she had just told her mother contradicted what I had recorded. She didn't sound like she was lying, and if I didn't know better, I might have believed her. This confirmed what I suspected: Jennifer was deluding herself. In self-protection, she had retreated into a false reality. Her conviction in this new version of our Sunday night conversation showed she was starting to realize the depth of the hole she had dug herself into. I restarted the recording. Lorraine had cut Jennifer off, clearly furious that her own daughter would lie to her. I made a mental note to discuss delusions with both Lorraine and Laura. If Jennifer was to recover from this ordeal, she would need their love and forgiveness. Listen, honey, I know that's a total lie. I know exactly what you said to Dave. You didn't give him a choice, you just told him you were going to cheat on him. I also know how devastated he is about all of this. Jennifer tried to interject, but Lorraine pressed on. Just think for a moment, Jen. How would you feel if the roles were reversed? What if Dave had sat you down and announced he was going to cheat on you on Friday night, whether you liked it or not? Would you be okay with that? No, Dave would never do something like that. He loves me too much. Jennifer broke into fresh sobs. For a moment, it seemed her delusion was cracking, but she gathered herself. Mom, it really wasn't like that. All right, Jen, I'm getting tired of your excuses. Where did this awful idea come from? You've always made me think you were completely happy with Dave. Jennifer stopped crying, finding some footing in her argument. Well, you know my friend Petra? She and her husband have an open relationship, and she says it has really improved their marriage. She says their sex life has never been better, and it's brought them closer together. I just want Dave to consider doing the same. Her voice trailed off again, her subconscious and delusions battling for control. Lorraine seized the opportunity to intervene gently. Is this the same Petra who was married at 18, divorced by 28 from her second husband, and lost custody of her kids from her first marriage? Is this the same Petra whose estranged kids want nothing to do with her? Jennifer didn't respond, clearly processing the implications of Lorraine's words. In a voice as cold as ice, Lorraine continued, Tell me, Jen, did Petra also suggest you threaten Dave with a divorce that would ruin him if he didn't go along with your plan? Jennifer's response was a mix of a sob and a gasp, explosive in its intensity. No, Mom, I never. Listen, Jenny, I can't take any more lies. They hurt me deeply. All I can say is, if you go through with this reckless plan, you'll lose me as well as your husband. You've probably already destroyed your marriage. There might be a chance if you crawl through broken glass and beg him for forgiveness, but I have my doubts. The connection abruptly cut off, indicating that Lorraine had slammed down the phone. Reviewing the same time segment on the kitchen voice recorder revealed an anguished scream from Jenny and a shout of, "It wasn't like that." I was a bit frustrated with Lorraine. I had explicitly asked her not to directly threaten Jennifer. It was crucial that Jennifer abandoned her plan for the right reasons. If she reacted to threats, there was no guarantee her desires wouldn't just go underground. She needed to recognize her mistake on her own. With the clarity of hindsight, I realized I might have stopped after just the 2 phone calls. Surely with 3 people telling her she was making a mistake, Jennifer might have agreed to counseling. But my plan was already on autopilot by this stage. While Lorraine was on the phone with Jennifer, I was on the line with John. As soon as Lorraine hung up, I quickly gave John the go-ahead. Chapter 4, Judgment Day, 9:32 a.m. to 10:03 a.m. John's task was to debunk all of Petra's lies and explain to Jennifer the truth about his feelings towards Petra's lover and why he stayed despite her humiliating behavior. He would refute her claims that their married sex life had improved. He pleaded with Jenny not to mention his call to Petra, as it could devastate his family. At precisely 9:32 a.m., John made that call. I won't detail every aspect of their conversation, but I will note that Jennifer's polite phone demeanor had been replaced with an abrupt what when he rang. Truthfully, it was uncomfortable for me to listen to the recordings, hearing Jenny's obvious pain. Throughout the call, Jennifer remained surprisingly quiet. I sensed her bewilderment rather than focused attention. While John played his role, I phoned my solicitor. In our prior briefing, we had discussed what he needed to convey to Jennifer. The guy sounded like he was having the time of his life. Isn't it odd how humor creeps in at the most inappropriate moments? It's almost a reflex for self-preservation. An old lawyer joke popped into my head. A demon crashes his hot rod through hell, punching a hole in the wall separating heaven and hell. God calls Satan over, asking how he'll fix it. Satan shrugs, nothing. God retorts, you'll hear from my lawyer. Satan smiles, where will you find a lawyer? God realizes he's already lost. I wondered, is he a bastard because he's a lawyer, or a lawyer because he's a bastard? At the conclusion of our call, I reminded my solicitor to immediately update me after speaking with Jennifer. By 9:43 a.m., John had called me, and I initiated Phase 5. The solicitor's task was to inform Jennifer that he had heard she had been misled regarding the consequences of any divorce caused by her infidelity. He would relay what I had shared about her split idea and the advice his colleague had given me. I had specifically requested him to include both infidelity and adultery in the conversation for maximum emotional impact. He executed it perfectly. Listening to the recording, I couldn't discern how much of the solicitor's advice Jennifer heard, as she was ranting throughout most of his speech. Undeterred, he persisted with his calm, even voice. Once he had finished, he promptly called me, eager to discuss, but I cut him short and dialed our family doctor to cue him. At 9:58 a.m., when the doctor called Jennifer, she answered with complete silence, akin to a condemned prisoner facing the gallows. After a brief greeting, the doctor launched into a prepared speech emphasizing the importance of men and extramarital relationships using condoms to prevent STDs. He detailed various diseases, their health implications, and treatment options. He also reminded Jennifer of her duty to safeguard her husband from these diseases. Or at least, that was his intention. 108 seconds into the call, Jennifer emitted a strange, strangled cry and abruptly hung up. Following the doctor's call to me, I placed my final call of the day to Father Wayne, confirming his presence at our front door. It was precisely 10:03 a.m. on Judgment Day. Reflecting back 3 days to that Wednesday morning, with all the calls and coordination completed, I finally allowed myself to relax. In my mind's eye, I pictured the scene unfolding in my former home, a distraught Jennifer, still in her dressing gown from being awakened early, devastated after enduring 5 intense and emotionally taxing phone calls. She hadn't eaten breakfast and had no time to process the calls that began just after 8:30 a.m. I envisioned her opening the door to Father Wayne, our spiritual guide of 12 years. Chapter 5, Judgment Day, 10:04 a.m. and beyond. Just over an hour later, Father Wayne's expected call came. "Come home, she needs you." I was already parked outside our house. Father Wayne met me at the door, urging forgiveness and offering assistance if needed before departing. Walking into the house, I had braced myself for various responses from Jennifer: remorse, anger, perhaps even embarrassment or acknowledgement of my success or failure. Yet, what I encountered was beyond anything I had imagined. Jennifer sat slumped at the kitchen table, her head resting on her arms, gazing blankly towards the window. She was a disheveled sight, puffy, bloodshot eyes, unkempt hair, and a torn dressing gown whose state I never understood. I softly called her name and sat beside her. There was no response, not to my voice, touch, or even my presence. Looking into her eyes, I was struck by the emptiness within. The lights were on, but Jennifer wasn't there. My heart sank. I had not shocked her into realization as planned. I had shattered her instead. I called an ambulance, and they took Jennifer away. I stayed by her side all day and through the night at the hospital, but the next morning, as they transferred her to the mental health facility, I had to leave her. I explained everything to the resident psychiatrist, playing him the recordings and admitting my role in Jennifer's breakdown. To his credit, he didn't pass judgment. My own self-condemnation was clear enough. With the recordings and my account, the psychiatrist began Jenny's treatment. He explained to me in straightforward terms that she was in a catatonic state, a defense mechanism of the brain where consciousness retreats when overwhelmed, akin to a protective mental shutdown. He likened it to techniques used in extreme brainwashing scenarios to break down the old self and potentially introduce a new one. And now I'm here, alone at home, cut off from the woman I love and burdened with overwhelming guilt. Despite the difficulty, I force myself to listen to all the recordings. The stress is pushing me towards my own mental brink. My only focus is discovering what finally triggered Jennifer's collapse. If I can pinpoint it, perhaps it will aid in her treatment. If only that egotistical part of my soul weren't congratulating me on a job well done. Maybe then, I could find some peace and sleep in the last 3 days. I'm convinced the breaking point was in Jennifer's early conversation with Father Wayne. I don't need to replay that recording, it's seared into my memory. Once inside the house, Father Wayne confronted Jennifer about her plans. She vehemently denied everything, convincingly so. There were a few moments of silence as the Reverend retrieved his laptop and started playing the recording I had given him. Within 30 seconds, chaos erupted. Father Wayne's voice cut through, starting with, "Have I got this right? After 21 blissful years of marriage." There was no mistaking it. This was the moment of Jennifer's collapse. I might not be a detective, but the screams and incomprehensible words were a clear giveaway. Surely, the psychiatrist needed to know which part of that recording triggered such a dramatic reaction. Was it the shock of being caught in a blatant lie to a man of God? Or perhaps it was the realization that her own delusions had been shattered by hearing the truth she couldn't deny. I wrestled with indecision, and it consumed me. Epilogue: Jennifer spent nearly 6 weeks in the institution. For the first 3 weeks, I couldn't visit or speak to her. The doctors insisted on controlling all her sensory inputs. By the end of the initial 3 weeks, her primary psychiatrist wanted assurance from Laura, her mother, and me that we were willing to forgive Jennifer. Though he didn't explicitly state it, it was clear that Jennifer's contact with us depended on our affirmation. He also emphasized the importance of keeping negative influences like Petra and Joan away from her. The remaining 3 weeks focused on rebuilding and optimizing Jennifer's hormone replacement therapy, HRT, doses. Despite not comprehending all the medical jargon, it appeared that Jennifer's psychotic episode stemmed from treatable premenopausal hormone fluctuations, a form of insanity, as confirmed by the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist also theorized that Petra had wielded an almost hypnotic sway over Jennifer during her vulnerable state. By the end of her treatment, I was 99.9% convinced that it was all behind us. The continued presence of the recorders covered the remaining 0.01%. Finally, I began to see the remorse that allowed me to lower my guard. A month after her release, Jennifer was still showering me with affection and intimacy. She took to quoting Spike Milligan at least once a week, "I've got a certificate to prove I'm sane, do you?" As I mentioned, I kept the phone taps active. The most amusing call came from Petra. Upon hearing her voice, Jennifer erupted in a fit of rage, hurling 20 different insults at her, some of which were unfamiliar to me and required a quick search. Finally, she hung up, wishing Petra to fuck off and die. It was completely out of character for Jennifer in terms of language and behavior. Joan received a gentler but equally firm dismissal. I supported John emotionally during his final 4 months with Petra. I relished every moment of it. He began by giving her an ultimatum to stop cheating on him. They fought, and he asked her to leave. She fell into his trap and departed for a month before crawling back, begging for forgiveness and promising to change her ways. 3 months later, John strategically recorded video of him catching her with another man during a widely publicized trip out of town, provided the final evidence he needed to end their sham of a marriage. One stroke of luck was when the lover's wife showed up at their family home and slapped Petra in front of her children. John considers it one of the most productive phone calls he ever made. He handled the divorce proceedings expertly. The assault, Petra's subsequent abandonment of the family home, the recorded plea for her to end the affair, the video evidence, and his prior reduction of work hours to accommodate school schedules all worked in his favor. He secured a 60-40 split, kept the house, gained custody of the children, and she had to pay child support. On the day of the divorce, John personally thanked Jennifer for the idea to adjust his work hours. Bill attempted to arrange a meeting with me, but I declined. While I strive to respect everyone's choices, I acknowledge my difficulty in conversing with those I hold no respect for. I knew my own healing was complete when my sense of humor returned. One evening, alone in the lounge, savoring a single malt, I reflected on the entire ordeal. Damn, Jennifer is lucky I didn't know the Pope's phone number. The end.